So if we take questions just on banking, and then I'll come back to a few of those other issues in a moment. Start at the front and work our way back. Shane?
Mr Graham, what's the financial arrangements between the banks and AusPost in terms of them continuing on with Bank at Post and ANZ coming on and possibly HSBC?
Yeah, we have over 80 agreements in place with banking and financial institutions for Bank at Post. Each of those are struck on a case-by-case basis and commercial in confidence. But we have two elements. That one is the infrastructure, paying for that network and particularly the technology and the compliance that goes with it. And the second one is the fees, basically paying for the services, particularly those provided by the licensed post offices.
Is it beneficial to AusPost?
Yes, it is beneficial, and as Minister Rowland mentioned, this creates a more sustainable platform for us for a horizon, whilst, as Anna said, we work collectively with government and the banks on the longer term solutions in regional and rural Australia.
Michael, and then Millie.
Treasurer, is it possible that the proposal for the rural bank levy could be revisited down the track despite today's announcement?
Oh, look, we've made it clear privately and a moment ago publicly that we think that there's more work to do. As you know, and as your paper covered extensively at the end of last year, we were in discussions with the banks about what could be done, including in that proposal, but other proposals as well. And so we've indicated that the work will continue, but these two announcements are very significant announcements in their own right. They mean that we can continue some of that other work with this clarity in place. Millie?
Treasurer, would you be open to sort of asking the banks to reverse some of the recent closures that they've made in regional areas?
Well, we're always working with the banks to make sure that they can have a presence in regional Australia. That's what today's announcement is all about. Our primary focus has been to arrest the decline. That decline that I mentioned since 2017, 36% of branches have closed. And so our first priority, our first responsibility is to arrest the decline, to get these moratoriums in place, to get the arrangements with Australia Post right, so that we can work on some of those longer term issues at the same time. Okay, anything else on banking? Okay, thank you, Anna and Paul. Thank you. Just wanted to touch on a couple of other issues before we take your questions. First of all, when it comes to the flooding in North and Far North Queensland, our focus remains on the human cost of what we're seeing in North and Far North Queensland in light of recent flooding. The danger is still present in North and Far North Queensland. We still have weather warnings. We still have communities severely impacted. We have roads cut. That has implications for supply chains and for things like the delivery of groceries. I want to pay tribute again to Jenny McAllister, who has been briefing us daily on developments in far North Queensland and North Queensland at the same time. So our primary focus is on the human cost of what's happening there, but we're also starting to get our heads around the economic cost as well. The cost to the budget will become clearer in time. We've made it very clear to the Queensland Government, with whom we are working very closely, that we will be there for the people of North Queensland and Far North Queensland when it comes to rebuilding their communities. Those priorities are determined by the Queensland Government, but we know that we will be making a serious financial commitment to those communities to help them recover and rebuild and get back on their feet. We've also sought some initial analysis on the economic cost of what's happening up there in Queensland. We know that the flood-affected region accounts for about 4% of agricultural production in Australia. That means there will be some economic impacts. We have some initial estimates from Treasury. We'll update these. These are just the first crack at these estimates. But we expect lost economic activity due to the floods to reduce GDP in the March quarter by about 0.1%. That might not sound like a lot, but at a time when growth is not especially thick on the ground in our economy, that is not inconsequential. Obviously, as we always see with these sorts of events, there's typically a bounce back in subsequent quarters, which comes from the rebuilding effort. But in the context of an economy which is already quite soft, another 0.1% of activity in the quarter we're in now will make a difference. The floods may also put some upward pressure on prices, but in quite a limited, narrow range of products. We don't expect the floods to affect the overall aggregate CPI or our overall aggregate forecasts for inflation. But it would be easy to see prices for things like bananas and sugar to be most likely impacted because of the loss of crops. Treasury estimates that up to 20% of Australia's banana crop could be affected. And so you can see that there might be quite narrow but significant impacts on some goods like bananas and sugar, but we don't expect the overall impact on inflation to be substantial in aggregate. We also know that there are those supply chain issues that Jenny McAllister is working on with our support. The Bruce Highway is obviously subject to prolonged disruptions, and there's some major damage in some of those networks, and so that will have economic implications as well. But I wanted to give you a sense of our early thinking on that. Next one is the production tax credits passed the Senate last night. I'm very grateful to Senate colleagues for passing that really important legislation. This is all about strengthening our economy and our industrial base by making it easier to maximise the opportunities that come from cleaner and cheaper energy. And so the production tax credits for hydrogen and critical minerals are a really important part of our Future Made in Australia agenda. They are a substantial investment. They're not about replacing private investment, they're about incentivising private investment so that we can become an indispensable part of the energy transformation that's taking place around the world. So very grateful to Senate colleagues, a very important progress that we made last night on those production tax credits, and they will make a meaningful difference. We want to build Australia's future with cleaner and cheaper energy, and these production tax credits will help us do that. Now, the final point I wanted to make is, before I take your questions, is on the conversation that was happening when we came in between Prime Minister Albanese and President Trump. That conversation was still underway as at about 8:30 this morning. I want to make it clear that the Prime Minister will update you on that conversation in due course later today, and I don't want to make predictions about that conversation which was taking place when we came here. But I will say this. The Australian-American economic relationship is a mutually beneficial one, and our job is to continue to ensure that it benefits both sides. The Americans have run a trade surplus with us for a long time, since the Truman administration, 1952, and that means that the Americans do really well out of the economic relationship with Australia, as does Australia. We will continue to stand up for Australia's national interest. We know as a trade-exposed economy that we do have an interest in making sure that the global trading system is maintained. We have indicated to you before that Australia has a lot of skin in the game when it comes to the possibilities of escalating trade tensions around the world. So the conversation between Prime Minister Albanese and President Trump is happening this morning in that context. Obviously, our steel and aluminium industries are very important to us. We will continue to stand up for them and for Australia's broader national economic interest as well. Happy to take some questions. We'll start at the back with Mark, then we'll go Ben, then Trudy.
Thanks, Treasurer. What's the status of the budget on March 25 today? Is it on, or is it scheduled, or is it planned? And I know you've said in the past that you won't be throwing the money around, but what sort of magnitude of cost of living relief can people expect?
Well, we're working towards a budget on March 25, and we met the Expenditure Review Committee last night. Michelle's a member of the ERC. We met that last night. We are working towards a budget towards the end of March. And what we've made really clear is the defining feature of that budget, just like the defining feature of the first three, is responsible economic management. And what we've been able to do is provide substantial cost of living relief at the same time as we've delivered two surpluses, got the Liberal debt down, while we've provided that cost of living help. And so people should expect from a fourth Labor budget the same sorts of things they saw in the first three, helping people where we can do that in a responsible way. But our focus right now is on rolling out the cost of living help that's already budgeted for. Ben, then Trudy.
Treasurer, I have just a moment for the press conference, but just quickly on, obviously it's not unexpected that the US government would have put tariffs on steel and aluminium. Did your Treasury model at all what the economic effects on Australia would have been from those tariffs?
Well, first of all, you're right that these are significant developments, but they're not especially surprising developments. A lot of these proposals were flagged in the American election campaign, and that gave us the opportunity to do a heap of work with Treasury and with DFAT and other agencies to try and get a handle on the potential impacts. I've not gone into all of the detail of that, but I have indicated to you previously and to colleagues here that there are two sets of impacts here. There's the direct impacts of any tariffs, and there is the broader impacts of escalating trade tensions involving the Americans, the Chinese and others. And so the Treasury looked at both of those sets of possible implications for us, not always in the most specific sense, trying to preempt every number or every percentage, but we've got a pretty firm handle. And from all of that work that we did before the election, we expect changes in policy from a new administration. We're confident that we can navigate them. We are well placed and well prepared to deal with announcements coming out of DC, and part of that effort is engaging directly, as the Prime Minister has this morning, with President Trump. Trudy.
Are you contemplating there's a real chance this time around that no country will get an exemption from Trump's steel and aluminium tariffs, and what impact is that?
I'm not here to make those kind of predictions or to preempt the report that the Prime Minister will give on his conversations later today. I'll just take a few more and then we probably should go. Michael's had one, so we'll go here, 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 and then Ron. Please.
Oh, sorry. The coalition has called the increase to the public service wasteful under Labor. Part of that work was supposed to go hand in hand with reducing the outsourced Labor bill. Do you think you've got the balance right on that? And are you confident that a second audit of the public service will show that progress against the Morrison government?
Yeah, I'm confident we have got the balance right. And public service numbers are driven by a couple of things. First of all, the terrific work that Katie Gallagher is doing, converting money that we used to spend on contractors and consultants into rebuilding capacity in the public service. That's one important input. And the other one is there's been a whole bunch of work that we've had to do to clear backlogs in areas like veterans claims. And I pay tribute to Shane in the front row for the work that he's done covering that. It's shameful, frankly, when we came to office and saw the backlog of veterans who hadn't been treated with the respect and dignity that they deserve after serving our country in uniform. And so some of these numbers are driven by our efforts to support veterans. And so those are a couple of the drivers. In terms of the longer term, we are confident that we're getting the balance right. It always requires ongoing attention. When we came to office, there was an over-reliance on contractors and consultants. The public service had been hollowed out, and Katie's good work with the support of all of us in the Cabinet has been to try and turn that around. Okay, please.
Australia has a number of expat industrialists who are close to President Trump. Have you attempted to speak to either the likes of Anthony Pratt or Gina Reinhardt to advocate on Australia's behalf?
I haven't spoken to either of those two people that you nominate. The discussions I had yesterday were with Rio Tinto, the global chair, and the Australian CEO, because obviously they can give a good sense of potential impacts, and including the fact that the colour is the story is complicated somewhat by the fact that some of our Australian steel and aluminium companies have got a presence in the US. They've got a presence in Canada. And so there is an element of complexity. And so my consultation has been with the business community and obviously conferring with colleagues as well. I haven't spoken to those two people that you mentioned. Please.
Joe Courtney, a Democrat congressman, has said that this decision this threat of tariffs is an insult to a key strategic ally like Australia. Do you share that sentiment, particularly given that Australia went to the US this weekend and put a down payment on, a huge down payment on AUKUS?
Well, a couple of things about that. I mean, we choose our own words, and my view of this is that this is a mutually beneficial economic relationship, and the job of both sides is to continue to make it so. I've met Joe Courtney a few times. He's a terrific guy, and he's a wonderful friend of Australia. But we would describe the situation differently. We'll continue to work with American counterparts to make sure that we can stand up for Australia's national economic interest and make sure that this mutually beneficial relationship continues to be so. Ron?
Thank you, Treasurer. Your recent RBA reforms have effectively given a new megaphone to the Governor. Do you think that's made it more difficult for you to tell a coherent narrative around the economy and government spending? And if I can, just one additional note, are you confident that news bargaining incentive is not the type of discriminatory tax that is being targeted by the Trump administration?
On your first question, I think it is overwhelmingly a good thing that the Reserve Bank Governor has taken up the opportunity recommended in the Reserve Bank reforms to talk the Australian people through the decisions that are taken by the Reserve Bank Board. I think that is overwhelmingly a good thing. It's one of the recommendations of the Reserve Bank review that has proven already to be a very good development. So I support it 100%. On your other question about news media bargaining code, obviously around the world, in light of what's happening with the OECD tax negotiations and arrangements, countries are looking at what alternatives there might be to that big multilateral solution that was proposed by the OECD. My job is to focus on that part of it. Michelle and Stephen Jones focus on the news media bargaining code for reasons that you are aware of. I think at a time when there's a new administration in the US, all of these issues come into play. All of these sorts of issues come into play. And that's why we're seeing, I think, countries around the world, not just Australia, look at the new administration in the US and making sure that our policies and priorities continue to serve that mutually beneficial relationship and that our national interest is well represented, whether it's in tax, whether it's in media policy, right across the board. We'll go to yourself, and then we'll take Michael's one because he is being persistent.
Okay, I've got a question to Minister Rowland. Heston Russel is in Canberra today. He is meeting with a whole lot of politicians. Will you meet with him, and what do you think of his push for a truly independent inquiry into what happened to him?
Well, firstly, I can confirm I have received a meeting request which is under consideration. But I'll make this point. The ABC has operational and editorial independence, but that does not mean that it is not above scrutiny and accountability. And we know that the report was handed down recently. There are avenues for Mr Russell if he wishes to pursue matters within the regulatory framework, as well as other legal avenues which he may wish to pursue. So whilst I acknowledge that the ABC in this matter does have operational and editorial independence, it does need to acknowledge where it has made mistakes. It does need to be transparent, and it does need to be transparent and accountable to the Australian people.
And a truly independent investigation, is that warranted?
Well, again, I note that this investigation was undertaken by a highly respected individual. I am aware also from reports that Mr Russell disputes that. That is a matter that he is in, and a view that he is entitled to hold. But the principle remains true, that the ABC must have editorial independence, but at the same time, that accountability.
Okay, last one, Michael, then we're done.
Minister Rowland, will the federal government consult with the Trump administration on the news media bargaining incentive to help make the case that it's not a discriminatory tax?
Well, again, the government has made it very clear that this is not targeted at any specific country. And in fact, this is not a scheme designed to raise revenue. It's designed to incentivise commercial deals. That is the whole point. So this builds on the existing news media bargaining code that is in place. Treasury and the government will continue to consult on this because, again, as a matter of principle, this is important for ensuring that Australian publishers are properly recompensed for the work that they undertake. That principle remains true.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.